Make a start. Sorry. Welcome everybody. I will make the presentation in English because there are some English people in the audience. In any case, we plan to be in English. Before I start, I'll have a short introduction about Ithaca, and then we'll give the floor to Dr. Yiannis Karavias. We have to inform you that Dr. Kossyvaki is not with us today because she's been poorly, so she sends her apologies. First of all, we'd like to thank you all for being here today. It's very encouraging to see so many people because we're very reluctant in the beginning to organize events like these ones. And thankfully, because there are so many people, we'll have even more in the future. Special thanks to Mr. Philippidis, who is here with us today, and he has been supporting us throughout this whole process. I know he doesn't like to be mentioned, and he's giving me a look, but we feel we have to thank him a lot. I won't tire you a lot. I'll just say a few things about Ithaca for the few people who don't know who we are, in case you want to find out more. So I'd like to start with thanking our sponsors, who are all Greek, Ulysses Restaurant and Bolsworth Shipping. This is our logo. So some words about us. So we are a group of Greek professionals, and we decided we wanted to create something here because we're feeling that we were missing things that we enjoy back home in Greece, and we wanted to do something about that instead of just moaning and keep complaining about how much we miss home. Many of us have been here for a few years, some others have been here for more years or even a whole life. And we are very grateful to say that with your support, we try to make things happen. You can find more details about us on our website, and you'll have the link of it at the end of this presentation. But just to say two things about our goal. So the first one, as I said before, is we want to preserve our cultural identity, to just keep doing things that make us happy, and we used to do when we were living in Greece. And at the same time, we would like to spread traditions beyond the Greek community, so to let other people who are not born Greeks, but feel Greeks or are friends of Greeks, just to feel like Greeks and spend time with us and do things together and know more about our culture. So how we organize, some of the ways that we organize all this. So we have, many of you I know have been already to some of them. So we organize traditional dance evenings and some live music evenings as well. There is one coming, and I'll got it at the end. We just started, and we want to hold more of these kind of talks on a range of topics like financial, historical, cultural. Also, we are hoping to put on a theatrical performance and have some cinema screenings. And also to engage in charity activities. Some of them are advertised, some others we just keep them for ourselves because we don't want to just advertise how we support people. So maybe some people might want to know how we survive financially, and this is how we make it happen so far. So with annual memberships, with fees for our classes, and if you want to become a member or you want to find more about the classes, you can go after the end of this session today on this table over there where Maria and Constantino sit, and they can give you all the details. We have some admission fees for events, and we have sponsors and donors. This is how we make it happen. So the first event for the next year is Technopenti, the Flat Thursday, I think it's called in English, I'm not even sure. We already have a date for that because it's Thursday. It's the 28th of February, and it's going to happen at Santorini restaurant, and that's the address. So more information will follow on our website, Facebook page. If you want to attend, you need to book your place because we've got limited spaces. Here are some of the classes. So we have theatrical performance, so people working together in order to put on a performance, and that's every Thursday evening from 7 to 9. Tuesday, sorry, that's what I meant to say. Our classes at the moment are spread in different places because we have an issue with the place where we used to be. So if you're interested in one of the classes, this is the place to go and ask. And here, we also have this information sheet where you can find more information. I'll just say the other classes, but not where they take place, just because they are on this slide. So we have the Byzantine choir, which is every other week on a Tuesday from 6:30 to 8. We have the iconography, which is every Saturday and 10:30 to 1:30. And the traditional Greek dances, which is every Friday from 7 to 9. So we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, Instagram. I was told we're on YouTube as well. This is our website. I think, so yeah, you can see the website up here. If you want to find out more and stay connected. And I'd like to thank you. This is a flyer you can take away, and please feel free to take any of these leaflets you want to with you. It's for you. And I'll just give the floor to Yiannis. Just to let you know a little bit about the duration for people who might want to know what's going to happen. So Yiannis will be talking for about an hour, and then we'll have a quarter of an hour for questions, and then we'll go home. So just to tell you that Yiannis works here at the University of Birmingham at the Department of Economics. He's a lecturer in financial economics, and in Greece is καθηγητής οικονομικής και χρηματοοικονομικής. I had to write this down because it makes no sense for me. And he's got a very interesting topic to share with us tonight. So over to Yiannis, and thanks everybody for being here.
So thanks a lot, Lila. I would like to thank Ithaca for the organization of this very interesting lecture. I would like to also thank you all for coming here. Unfortunately, Katerina was not able to come. She was a bit sick, but I will try to say some things on her part at the end. So the timing of this lecture is, we had arranged this a long time ago, and then we found out that the MPs were about to vote for the Brexit deal at the same time. And actually on Sunday I checked the times, and the voting would have started at 7 o'clock. Okay, so I had the plan to put the voting at one screen in the corner and have it at the same time. Anyway, this thing got cancelled, and from what I heard, Theresa May is now she had a meeting with Angela Merkel, so I'm looking, and I think we are all looking forward to what's going to happen with great interest, because it will affect all of us. So those who are here, UK citizens, EU citizens, Greeks, British, Irish, and so on. Okay. That would be all. So a few words about the talk. So I'm going to start at the place where everything started, at the point in time where everything started. Well, not exactly that point, but this is the referendum. So it started with the, I want to go back to the referendum. These are things that we know and we remember from the television, from the news, so I think it's common knowledge, but I would like to go back to these things because I want to focus on some of the arguments made in favor of Brexit and in favor of the Remain, because I'm going to use these arguments later and I'll explain how. So the second part of the lecture is going to be about international trade. So why is international trade is good? Some basic information and what is a trade agreement, what types of trade agreements they are. Like, for example, you must have heard about the customs union, a free trade area, and so on. All these things. So a little bit of background on that. A little bit of background on the EU. So what is the EU? What's good with the EU? What's bad with the EU? And then I'm going to go into the main part of this lecture, which is the nexus between economic theory and politics, because the EU and Brexit and all that are right in between economic theory and politics. So I'm going to see what theory says. So there are several theories, but there are some theories in which I favor and which I believe are the correct theories of what is happening. So then I'm going to feed the information from the referendum into these economic theories, and then I'm going to use these theories to create a prediction of what's going to happen or what is the best thing to happen. Okay, and in the meanwhile, I'm going to also talk about Theresa May's deal and what that deal does and what it doesn't. So, on June 23rd in 2016, the United Kingdom voted, and 51.9% of the people were voted in favor of Brexit. And the other percentage is 48.9%, which were the so-called Remainers. And the difference between the two is quite a small one, about 1 million people and 1,300,000 people. But how did everything start? So it started with this party, the UK Independence Party, which entered the mainstream politics in 2014. Now, it's very important. I'm focusing on this party because it started as a single issue party. So it was a party without a general agenda on things, but it was the champion of one cause. It was the champion of the UK leaving the European Union. And if you go to the manifesto of this party, and it's described as a Eurosceptic party, they were saying no more money to be paid to the EU, no more EU laws, no more jurisdiction by the European Court of Justice, and no more open border EU immigration. So basically, they are against the EU. So this party got traction in the local elections in 2013, but in the 2014 European Parliament elections, it got the majority of votes, and it got a stunning 27.5%. So this percentage was higher than Labour or the Conservative Party or anyone else. And it's the first time that the Conservatives or Labour were not the first party for many, many years. So suddenly you see 24 members of the European Parliament being basically against the EU. And then in the 2015 general election, the UKIP secured over 3.8 million votes, so 12.6% of the total, replacing the Liberal Democrats as the third most popular party. So suddenly, in a few years, it becomes the third party in UK politics, and it's taking votes from the Conservatives. So the Conservative leader at that time and Prime Minister was David Cameron. And in 2003, because he was being flanked by the UKIP, he announced that if his Conservative Party won the 2015 general election, there would be a referendum on the EU by 2017. So why make this promise? So he made this promise as a way of counteracting the increasingly popular anti-EU and UK Independence Party. And the idea was that if you have a referendum and you win it, then the UKIP has no longer a reason of existence. So it should not take many votes anymore. And of course, there was this also other political game. So the Conservatives were sharing the government with the Liberal Democrats. So he was hoping that in the 2015 election, he would still have a shared government, and because the Liberal Democrats would not agree to a referendum, then he would not have to go through with the referendum. But it turns out that he won the full majority. And he got the full majority, and he kept his promise. So sometimes this is something that you don't believe from politicians, but David Cameron kept his promise, and that's why we had the referendum. So there were many arguments in favor of Brexit and in favor of Remain. And the Conservatives, the party which was in the government, was actually torn, was split in half, and some of those people supported Remain, including Theresa May, the current Prime Minister, and some of them supported Brexit. Here's a picture of Boris Johnson, a lead figure in the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson, at the beginning, he was in favor of Remain, and then he turned to Brexit. And as soon as he turned to Brexit, he basically became the leader of, the de facto leader of the Brexit campaign. So one of the highlights of the Brexit referendum is this so-called Brexit bus. So this was a red bus moving around the streets in the UK, and it was writing, "We send the EU 350 million pounds per week." Okay, so why not use them to fund the NHS instead? So this is a very, very important argument, and I want you to keep this, because it expresses some preferences. It expresses preference. We don't want to spend this money in the EU. We want to spend them on NHS. The second highlight from the referendum, which I would like to remember, and I think it's very important, is this picture of Nigel Farage. So he's the leader of the UKIP party, and he had this poster saying, "Breaking point. The EU has failed us all. We must break free of the EU and take back control." So this argument was an anti-immigration argument, and it was part of a set of arguments at that time, one of which was also saying that Turkey would also join the EU, and millions of immigrants from Turkey will come to the UK, and so on. So you see these two sentiments. The one has to do with immigration, the other has to do with the way that money is spent. Now, when we have a look at this poll, so this is a poll that came after the referendum, and it was asking why did you vote Remain and why did you vote Leave? So I don't know if this is clearly visible, but with the yellow, we have the people which voted Remain, and with the blue, we have the people that voted for Leave. So the number one reason that someone voted in favor of Remain says here, the risks of voting to leave the EU looked too great when it came to things like the economy, jobs, and prices. So this is an economic argument. Then the second reason is access to the EU single market while out of the euro, and no borders area, giving the best of both worlds. Another very important thing. So you don't have the common currency, but you have access to the single market. So the government has some flexibility in its monetary policy. And of course, you have no borders, which is also very important in Northern Ireland. And then the third reason is a feeling that we will become more isolated by living. So this may be cultural or political or whatever. Now, when we go to the arguments of why people voted to leave, we have here that the number one reason is that the principle that decisions about the UK should be taken in the UK. So it's an argument that has to do with taking back control. It has to do with legislation. It has to do with a lot of things, but basically the ability to govern of the government to make decisions. And the second reason was voting to leave offered the best chance for the UK to regain control over immigration and its own border. So we see that after the referendum, actually the two reasons which were the highlights which were campaigned by the Brexit campaign were the main reasons that led to Brexit. The third reason here is that remaining meant little or no choice about how the EU expanded memberships or powers. So this has to do with the European expansion. It has to do with the Eastern European states entering the EU and immigration coming into the UK, and of course future prospects like Turkey joining the EU. So we see these arguments, and I would like not to stop at these arguments, but I would like to see some other similar arguments which appear in modern day now in the EU, and they are of the same flavor, let's say. So the first saying is by Salvini. Salvini is the deputy prime minister right now of Italy, and he's also the leader of a party which favors separatism in the north of Italy. So, okay? So both of these things are very important, so we will see separatism in a bit. And he said the Brexit vote in June to exit the EU was a beautiful breath of oxygen. So he was in favor. There's water on Mars and there's life beyond Brussels, so he's very in favor of Brexit. And then you have Marine Le Pen. So her party was actually the first party in the European Parliament elections in 2014. So Marine Le Pen repeated something like the UKIP, and she says that Brexit shows that there is at least one way of finding the keys of the jail. So she describes the EU like a jail because we have been told that it was impossible to leave the EU, and the UK has just demonstrated that when people want it, well, you can set up the conditions, basically. And we have the so-called terms, you may have read them, Quitali, which is corresponding to Brexit, and it's about Italy leaving the EU, and we have Frexit, which is about France exiting the EU, and so on. So the question is, why everyone wants out, or what is the reason behind these EU sentiments? Because there must be a common reason. Okay. So this is the background against which I will try to now I will try to give you some information on international trade theory, and then we're going to use all that to build up on the main arguments of the economic theory and see what predictions can be made. So when it comes to international trade, we have this. We have one of the founders of modern economics, so John Maynard Keynes, in his book, The Economic Consequences of Peace. And he makes the following statement, which is very, very bold. So in a regime of free trade, and free economic intercourse, so that means economic activity, it would be of little consequence that iron lay on one side of a political frontier and labor, coal, and blast furnaces on the other. So here, in this statement, we have the political frontier, which is basically a border. It's a border between countries. And what he says that if you had a free trade between these countries, then it wouldn't matter if the resource, iron, would be on one country and labor and capital would be on the other country, because they would trade with each other and they would both benefit from using these resources. And then he continues, but as it is, men have devised ways to impoverish themselves and one another and prefer collective animosities to individual happiness. So he uses this word animosity on describing the country or the nation, which is of course a very bold saying, but in Keynes' mind, the perfect world is a world with no borders, where everyone is free to go wherever they want, and the free market will allocate people in the best way. So international trade, in simple terms, I'm going to give an example, is beneficial for both parties. So suppose that you have a doctor, and a doctor wants to paint his house. Now he has two choices. A, spend a week in his house, say 5 working days, and paint the house himself. The second choice would be B, he's actually a surgeon, to go to the hospital, do the surgeries, and then make some money out of these surgeries and pay another guy, a painter, to come and paint the house. So what the doctor will do is actually go to the hospital and do the surgeries. Why? Because he's going to make a lot more money from the surgeries, he's going to pay the painter, and he's going to have some extra money left. So it's profitable for the doctor to go to the hospital. So the doctor, it's also profitable for the painter to go and paint the house. So the painter, in a sense, is an import, and going to the hospital is an export. So if you can export what you are good at, if you can export the thing on which you have an advantage, then you can make more money than trying to do everything yourself. And so this is an argument that it's better to have trade than have autarky. So it's better to be specialized on something than just do everything yourself, because you are not able to do everything yourself in the same way. It's better to do what you're good at and what you're best at than focus and spend resources on things that you're not good at. And this example applies to countries as well. So for example, you have the United States of America. They're famous for their movies. They're really specialized in that. And Hollywood is a very profitable business. You have Korea, which has high technology. You have Switzerland, which has good watches. You have many, many countries specialized on one thing. So you have this specialization. However, especially in the past, we had protectionism, we had tariffs and quotas. Okay? So tariffs in Greek, so I think this might be a bit difficult, is das me. Okay? And quotas is basically a limit to how much you can export to another country. Protectionism is protectionism was favored by many governments, because by having tariffs on your imports, so a tariff is a tax. So basically, by introducing taxes to goods from other countries, it does protect your home industry. So if you have a tariff, it means that foreign products are more expensive and home products are less expensive because they don't have the tax. The problem with protectionism is that it arises because these industries are strong enough to lobby with the government. And the problem is that while these industries are working and people have jobs, the problem is that consumers are spending too much money on these goods, and therefore it's not the best equilibrium in terms of quality of life and in terms of income. So in 1947, the average tariff rate was 40% around the world. And in 2018, the average tariff rate fell down to 5%. So we see that as time passes, the tariffs are being lowered and international trade is growing. So international trade leads to specialization, it leads to innovation. So you have to be innovative as a country to stand. You need to have efficient businesses. You have to be efficient in administration and so on, but it leads to economic growth. And another outcome is that it leads to world peace. So after 1947, the number of wars has gone down, and basically we live in a much more peaceful world. The types of trade agreements that exist is the free trade area, the customs union, and the EU single market. There are basically other types as well, but I'm going to focus in these three because these three appear in the mainstream news right now. So what is the free trade area? Suppose that you have a country A and a country B, and they decide to become a free trade area. This means that there are no tariffs or quotas in trade between these countries. However, this agreement is relatively loose because country A can negotiate a deal with country C, for example, with another country, and country B can negotiate a deal with country C, and these two deals might be different to each other, and they might be competitive. So one country, country A, might try to undercut country B and gain more. So this is a weak type of agreement, but it gives you the reduction of tariffs, so you don't have tariffs, and it gives you some flexibility. The stronger type of agreement is the customs union. So in a customs union, these two countries create a bloc. So this means that they work together. There are no quotas or tariffs between them, but there are, and also they apply external, common external tariffs to any other country in the world. So this means that all taxes that have to do with the outside world, they are the same for both countries A and B. So they behave like a bloc, and they gain, in a sense, they gain more from economies of scale, but they lose freedom. And then you have what is something very special, and what is one of the most interesting experiments in the world of economic history. You have the EU single market. So the EU single market is a much more complicated integration between countries. The first major difference is that these two agreements are mostly about goods, manufacturing goods, agricultural goods, and so on. But the EU single market is much more than that. It allows the free trade of services. It allows the free trade, the free movement of people, and the free movement of capital. So it's a much more deeper union between the countries in the European Union. Now, this is a map of how the global tariffs are on average right now. So you can see that the average tariffs are really low in the developed countries. They're much higher in the developing countries. Okay, so this is how the world looks like right now. And then you have the European Union Customs Union. So the countries in dark blue belong into a customs union. This means that all goods within these countries can move freely without tariffs or quotas. And then you have Turkey, which is also part of the customs union. So you have goods moving between the EU and Turkey, but the customs union in Turkey is not complete. So it applies only to manufacturing goods. So manufacturing goods can move between the EU and Turkey, but without further checks, but not other types of goods. Now, in 2018, in July, the European Union ratified a new trade deal with Japan, and Japan is the third largest economy in the world. So this is how a trade deal looks like. So this is, you cannot see this, but I think now it's more clear. So it's really nice to see the arguments that they're saying. These deals are the types of deals that the UK wants to make after Brexit, and they're very difficult and time-consuming. So, for example, here is what happened before. We had high Japanese customs and taxes. So the tariff on beef was about 40%. So you couldn't I don't know, export nice Angus beef in Japan. It's because it's too expensive. There's a 30% tariff on chocolate, 15% on wine, and 40% on cheese. So this is very bad news for the Greek feta. Okay? So you have things like that. Also, for example, Japan has long and costly procedures to approve its variety of fruit. So this discourages EU exporters from trying to get all the necessary approvals. So basically, you're not selling what you're good at. We're good at making feta, and we're not selling it in Japan. But now with this deal, we will be able to do it. So it says here some good things and so on. Some positive parts. I would like to stay at this one. It's a very precise calculation that says it can create EU jobs. Every 1 billion in EU exports supports 14,000 jobs in Europe. So we see that this is a very important deal. Okay. So such deal, the European Union has also with Canada. That was the latest achievement. So the deal with Canada took 7 years to forge and still hasn't been ratified. So you understand that making these deals is a very, very complicated and time-consuming thing. And this is a graph of the European, of the single market. So you can see here that we have the blue countries of the European Union, and then we have Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland, and Liechtenstein and other countries which participate in this single market. So it's a very big market. It's a market of 500 million people. And this means that once you create something, then you can sell it everywhere in here. Norway has a quite different agreement with the EU. So Norway is half in the market, half out in a sense. So the common agricultural policy and the fisheries policy about fish, it does not apply to Norway. So when these products come into the EU, they are subject to tariffs. But people can move freely in Norway, and Norway pays money into the budget of the EU and also accepts the EU laws and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. So it's a middle case. And also Norway is free to make other agreements with other countries with different tariffs. So let's focus a bit more on the European Union. So it allows the free movement of goods, capital, services, and people. And this is a very complicated thing that is achieved by a standardized system of laws. Now, this is a very, very important thing because it basically says that the laws of the market are the same everywhere in this single market, and it keeps the playing field level. So there's no advantage that a firm can have in one country over the firm in another country. It's very difficult to achieve, and it's very important because a form of trade barrier, which I didn't discuss earlier, beyond tariffs, is the internal, every country's internal administration. So you have some laws about the quality of products. So for example, the products in the European Union must have the allergens in bold. Okay, so you see when you buy something to eat, the allergens there are in bold. So this applies everywhere in the EU. If you were a country to export something in the EU and you would also like to export something in Brazil, then this means that perhaps you had to do 2 different types of packaging. Okay, so that's an extra cost. But now in this massive market, you create one packaging and it goes to all these consumers. It also has the monetary union, it has the Schengen area, and so on, which further reduces costs of transportation and so on. Now, the values of the EU is freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. And I bring this up because here we have the word of democracy. So one of the arguments of the Brexit campaign was that there was a democratic deficit and there are laws and decisions taken in Brussels, and these they do not affect, they have to be taken at face value from the UK. I would like to say that the European Union, so the European Union is governed basically by the European Council, which is the council of the prime ministers of every country. So in a sense, you have an intergovernmental body which makes the final decisions, the important decisions, and every prime minister in that body has the right to veto. Okay, so it's a very, very strong power. And then you have the European Parliament, which is elected, and you also have the European Commission, which is not elected, but the European Commission creates the laws. Its mandate is to look for the benefit of the whole Union, and it creates the laws, and these laws are voted by the Parliament, okay, which is voted by us. So it's the basic values of the EU is freedom, democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And now that we have a background on these things, I would like to give you the economic theory and let you know how I apply this economic theory in this scenario. So this theory is not my theory. I have references for everything that I've said in the end, and I can send you the presentation. But I really, and there are other competing theories, but I really favor this one. So I would like to discuss it. So let's go a little bit back in time again and have a look at the number of countries in the world. So the number of countries in the world increased from 74 to 1940, in 1946 to 192 in 1995. So the number of countries more than doubled. And then In 1995, we have 87 countries having a population of less than 5 million. We have 58 countries have less than 2.5 million, and we have 35 countries having a population of less than 500,000. So the country is not, the term country does not refer to a big thing, okay? And here it says that more than half of the world's countries are smaller in population than the city of Athens, and even more than the city of London, and so on. Furthermore, this generation of countries does not seem to stop. So we have separatist movements in Quebec. So Quebec had a referendum about separating from Canada. We had a referendum here regarding Scotland. We know the issues of Catalonia this year, the Legia of the North in Italy. We had the issue with the Flemish in Belgium, autonomy in Basque Country, and many other separatist movements. So we see that the number of countries is increasing, and it seems that more and more are increasing. So this is connected to the tariff rates. So we saw before that after the Second World War, tariff rates fell dramatically, and the number of countries increased rapidly. In the same half century, the volume of imports plus exports as a share of world GDP in a sum of 61 countries has increased by roughly 40%. And this is the main statement of the economic theory that I'm going to say, which can be described in this phrase. So economic integration causes political disintegration. So as we move closer to each other economically, we move away from each other politically. So you have the big countries broken down to smaller ones. So we are moving towards smaller countries, and this is, it seems that this is the course of history. We're going that way. We're moving towards smaller countries. So the question is, why these countries are centered on the idea of the nation? This is very important. And then the second question is the European Union political integration, because this is the ultimate goal? So typically the ultimate goal is an ever closer union, but this is what's the idea behind it. So is the EU political integration going the opposite direction? It seems so. And does this make sense? Okay. Because once you know about the political integration, then we can go back to Brexit. So this slide here describes the basic theory. Public goods like legal systems, defense, security, common currency, and the ultimate public good of all, the government, come with economies of scale. So these are benefits from a larger country size. So if you have a large country, the size of your country is large, then you have a good provision of public goods. You have a lot of tanks, a lot of airplanes, you have good justice, security, and so on. Okay? The problem is, so this is an argument in favor of having a large country. The problem is that these benefits must be traded against the costs of heterogeneity. Okay? So different preferences for public policies in larger, more diverse populations. So heterogeneity has to do with different preferences in different populations. Do we have heterogeneity, for example, in the United Kingdom? Yes, so the United Kingdom, it has benefits for the poor, and the poor are being seen as unlucky, for example, but these benefits are reluctantly extended, for example, to immigrants, particularly coming from Eastern Europe. In the US, where the population heterogeneity is much larger, there are no benefits of such type. So racial heterogeneity does affect your choices in government spending. You would not like your government to provide benefits for other types of people. And it does not apply in these cases, but it applies to more general cases where more than one big populations exist in the same country. And it applies to cases where there are linguistic differences between the populations in this country. So it seems that big countries have the problem of heterogeneity. Different populations have different preferences, and the single government, which is the ultimate public good, cannot accommodate all preferences. So in a world of trade restrictions, the political boundaries of a country influence the size of a country's market. So if you have these high tariffs and you cannot export your goods, then your market where you can sell your goods is just the size of the country that you are in. This is your limit. On the contrary, with free trade, the size of countries is irrelevant for the size of the markets. So the size of a country is unrelated to productivity. So if you are in a free trade environment and you know that you can sell your good to everyone, you're not interested in having the benefit of a large market. So heterogeneity is costly and there's no need for it. And that's why you have separatism. So consider the case of Scotland. This is something that you all remember. There is a difference between, there's a heterogeneity between the Scottish people and the English people, and Scots voted for independence. One of the main arguments of independent Scotland was that they would be they would be accepted into the European Union immediately. So they would be able to trade their goods with Europe. However, one of the arguments of the English government and of David Cameron, which won that referendum, was that, and he was backed by Brussels on this, was that if... Is it 8 o'clock?
There's an issue, yeah. Sorry. We want to continue and I'll put it back. Sorry about that.
So one of the arguments of David Cameron in Brussels was that if you leave the UK, you're also leaving the European Union. So suddenly they become a small country which does not have a large market to sell their goods. So Europe, the free trade, the free market area actually gives you an incentive towards separatism. Okay? And this is the same thing which applies in the world. Now I would like to go back also to the colonial history. So you had the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, and all these empires. And why did we have all these empires? Because within the empire, you had a free trade zone. So that's why the empire was sustainable. You had heterogeneity of people, but the cost of heterogeneity was covered by the benefits of the free trade within that area. And of course, the empires did not trade with each other. They had massive tariffs, so there was absolutely almost no trade between the empires, and therefore, to increase their market size, they had to compete for new countries. They had to annex new countries. And this protectionism and this lack of trade led to 2 world wars. So I don't know if you can see this, but here's also a saying that the British Prime Minister in 1897 told the French ambassador that if you were not such persistent protectionists, you would not find us so keen to annex territories. Okay? And this is a map of the economic geography of Europe, and you will have seen maps of Lila, are you going to get this?
I don't know what's this not working.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay, don't
It's
worry.
working, it's working.
Okay, it's working, it's working.
Cancel.
And this is a map of the economic heterogeneity in Europe. So you can see here that if you have, this is the GDP per region, and you can see that the pink areas are the poorest areas, and the dark blue areas are the richest areas. So you can see that there's a big economic heterogeneity in Europe, and there's also linguistic heterogeneity, religious heterogeneity, national heterogeneity, and all sorts of heterogeneity. So bringing all these people together has a cost in the way that governments cannot deal with their needs, and therefore there's a cost in integrating these people, but also there's a benefit from the economic integration, and we must find what is the equilibrium, where we need to be at a point where we have more gains than costs. Okay? So this is what I'm going to argue in this talk, is that the rise of Euroscepticism, as we saw it in UKIP, as we saw it in Salvini's talks, as we saw it in France, is a result of heterogeneity cost. So how was the European Union formed? It started from economic agreements, okay? It started from the coal and steel community, and then we had more economic agreements, and so on. So we reap the benefits of the economic agreement, agreements, and there now we're moving towards a political integration, but the political integration has a cost. So that's why this is what's creating all this turmoil. You have now these supranational institutions, and these cannot succeed when there's no common will from national governments. So the European Union is based on institutions like the EU Commission, but these institutions are under the will of the national government. So for example, we had the Growth and Stability Pact, which was saying that the public debt of any EU country should not exceed 60%, and the deficit should not be below 3%, and if you were not doing that, you would have to have a sanction. But this is not applying because Germany and France started violating this agreement, and so on. So the problem is that having supranational institutions in all these agreements creates a cost, and in the end, it doesn't lead to doesn't take us to the point where we would like. So they cannot actually control the national governments. So the best thing for Europe, according to this theory, is to have a minimum set of agreement for the sustainability of the euro. So we could move forward into a banking and financial integration, but political integration may not be possible unless heterogeneity is reduced. And how do you reduce heterogeneity? With a common European identity. So how do you have people having a common European identity? This is very, very difficult in a democracy because democracies respect heterogeneity in the population and in the minorities. Okay? So this is the question that needs that we will have in our talk, and this is the question against we will evaluate Brexit. Is the cost of heterogeneity greater than the benefits of economic integration for the UK? So the benefits is that 49% of UK trade, so this is both imports plus exports, are with the EU. Another 12% is through EU preferential agreements. So the EU is a big bloc of countries and it has negotiating power. So it has good agreements, and therefore there's extra trade. Almost 60% of the UK trade is through the EU. And also very important is that 80% of the UK's GDP is coming from services. And these services can be exported in the European Union, but they cannot be exported, for example, in the trade deal. They're not included in the trade deal with Canada. So these are the benefits. The cost is that the UK, like every member of the EU, pays money into the EU budget, and the EU is basically a government which redistributes these goods. Now, this is a heterogeneity cost. This is what they were saying, we don't want to pay this 350 million pounds in the EU. So they wanted to spend the money differently. So the UK, in fact, is a net contributor in the EU. So about 1% of the UK GDP is going into, it's the net contribution into the EU, while for Greece, for example, Greece receives about 2.5% of its GDP as a return from the EU. Okay? So this is one cost, and the other cost is immigration. So you have 13% of the population in the UK right now being immigrants, which is another heterogeneity cost. Now these costs, all of them, they're estimates, okay? And it does have to do with the government and not in general with the economy. So you can see here, this is a graph of the UK unemployment rate, because which says here are the years of the crisis. So the unemployment rate, despite having more and more people coming into the UK, the unemployment rate drops. So there are more jobs created. Okay. So these two things, benefits and costs. And let's see what the UK's, what May's deal does. So the UK leaves the EU on the 29th of March in 2019. The transition period lasts until December 2020 and can be extended until the end of 2022. So the agreement is that any person from Europe that comes and becomes a resident in the UK until the end of the transition period, they get the right to have a settled status. So until that time, after the 29th of March, the UK will lose membership, so it will withdraw its representatives from the Parliament, from everywhere in the European Union, but it will still have to abide by all the EU laws and take them. And then it will have to pay about 39 billion into the EU budget. These are money for projects which have already been agreed. UK citizens in the EU and EU citizens in the UK will retain their residency and social security rights after Brexit. Citizens can take residence in the UK until the end of the transition period, and anyone that stays in the same EU country for 5 years will be allowed to apply for a permanent residence. Of course, with this agreement, the UK takes back control of the borders and a lot of the legislative powers and a lot of the independence for the government. But then you have these two issues which are interconnected. So the first part that I wrote in upside down is that which is the future EU-UK relationship. So during the transition period, the UK and the EU will negotiate a new trade deal. And this is very important because we saw that trade deals are beneficial for everyone. Okay? And here we have these saying like we're going to have the Norway model or the Plus Canada agreement and so on. The problem, however, is the so-called Northern Ireland backstop, which says that because after after Brexit, we're not sure that there will be an EU-UK relationship. Some people in favor of Brexit support a hard Brexit and support trade in World Trade Organization rules. So this means no other relationship between EU and UK. Then in that case, a hard border must return in Ireland. But this is not a good idea because of tensions in the area and because both the EU and the UK want to keep the Good Friday Agreement. It says that there's no border in Northern Ireland. So at this point, it's easy because both of the United Kingdom and Ireland are in the EU, so they're in the single European market. But then after Brexit, it would be difficult. So as a guarantee of the European Union that Britain will not unilaterally leave. So basically, if there is no EU-UK relationship, then it would be you would have a hard border. So this insurance says that in the event of no agreement between the EU and UK in the future, the UK agrees to stay in a customs union with the EU until the problem is resolved. And this might be until forever. Okay, so this is one of the main points of conflict against Theresa May's deal. Okay, so predictions. Now, we have to balance heterogeneity and gains from trade. Clearly, there is heterogeneity between the UK and the main European Union. So the best thing for the two, if Northern Ireland didn't exist, would be a comprehensive free trade deal, but without the EU integration. So no more free movement of people. Although the economic theory would support that, because there is this heterogeneity cost, then the best thing would be a free trade deal between the UK and EU. Now, since we have the northern, there is the problem with Northern Ireland, the next best thing is border checks in the Irish Sea. Because now we have to bring into focus heterogeneity within the UK. Scotland and Northern Ireland, they voted in favor of remaining in the EU because they trade more, or they trade more with the EU. So having a border check in the Irish Sea will have Northern Ireland staying in the single market, but the rest of the UK at least leaving it. However, this creates problems of sovereignty in the UK. We know now that leaving without the deal is the worst case scenario and might lead to devolution of the United Kingdom. So you have that 45% of the Scottish people were in favor of the EU, even when there was a possibility that exiting the UK would not bring them back into the EU. Now, if there is an option that leaving the UK will allow them to stay in the European Union, then that makes it a real possibility that they are in favor of leaving the UK and entering this single market. And this similar incentive applies to the case of Northern Ireland. So I think that the hard Brexit is the worst thing that can happen. And then when it comes to the EU, there is little gain in political integration, except perhaps for a financial and banking union. So it's really difficult to talk for an ever closer union in order to deal with the crisis and the future crisis. So the solution is not political integration, and the response to political integration is the is the Euroscepticism. Okay? And it's difficult to build European identity. So this is how I would like to conclude. Always I have in mind what is the incentive of what is how you can enter this trade agreement. This trade agreement gives you the incentive to separate, to have your own government, which caters for your own needs, and which leads to you the best economic outcome. And then you have the costs of heterogeneity. So one final thing which also comes in mind is with Greece. So, for example, Greece has a strong incentive to have a large military spending, and in general would be in favor of the political integration because the common state would have economies of scale, so that would help the military demands of Greece. But this is not good for, this is not acceptable for other people in Europe, for example, who are taxpayers and who do not want to pay for military spending in Greece, and so on. So you have to balance these things. And I would like to end with this slide. This is an old picture of the border in North Ireland, and this slide says back to the future. So we are back in the future. This is the future, no borders. Okay? And if you have any questions, Katerina's talk, I'm not going to bring it up, but she also talks about the labor market. So there are a lot of laws in the UK labor market which come from the EU. For example, the paternity leave. So even basic laws, there are many basic laws coming from the EU. And her talk was also about NHS. One problem with NHS is that it spends about 150 million per year on foreign nationals working for the NHS. If the UK leaves the EU Union, then the UK will have to pay for visa and so on. So the cost might even triple. Okay, and that's all. So I will take questions.
Okay, first of all, the way you describe this particular theory doesn't really sound more like Keynes, but more like Friedman. Because what you're really saying is that the only way to go through the crisis is actually to create some kind of a global government or a one government in Europe that take control, political control of everything. That's the only way really to go through the crisis. So this is not really Keynes. Anyway, I don't want to go through economic theories. Now the question which I have, which is quite important, is you're actually mentioning that we have a case that it's actually better to have, anyway, the only argument that clearly economic integration actually leads to political disintegration. So why we haven't seen those things happen in the case of China, in the case of US and other countries? Because clearly we have completely massive heterogeneity in the population, completely massive inequality, economic inequality. To take South, take Chongqing, take whatever, Hong Kong, compared to Shanghai and whatever. And they haven't disintegrated now. And probably they're going to monopolize the global economy for the next 100 years. One option is that. Second, you say that it's actually more favorable for countries to be out. If they come out of the agreement, like UK, it took 9 years, 130 countries, to produce a 26,000 pages document, the Uruguay Round Agreement with the WTO. If you actually leave out the EU, the cost actually is not a question about the heterogeneity cost versus the benefits. It's actually more about the heterogeneity cost versus the cost of being out, because then you have to go back to the WTO to negotiate new terms to join global trade agreements, which means it will take another 40 years to be accepted by anybody. So really, first of all, can you answer the first question, about the theory? Because I just can't say the theory, it doesn't make any sense to me.
So the first theory was actually saying quite the opposite, not a global government, but disintegration to the national level. You have countries which are countries' nations, so a smaller heterogeneity as possible. And this is the best case is these nationalities have their own government which caters their own needs, so no heterogeneity, and they are trading with each other into free trade areas. So not one government, but many governments built on different nationalities. The second thing is, this is what I'm saying. I also said that I think we agree on the second thing is that it's really costly for countries to enter these free trade agreements, and they're really lengthy and so on. So it's very difficult for the UK to build all this. Also, during the transition period, because the other countries do not know what the final relationship between the UK and EU will be and how close that relationship would be, they wouldn't invest resources to start negotiating on something that might never happen. Okay, so it's very difficult.
So really, that leads to the result that the smaller you are, clearly, the more difficult it is for you to negotiate. So really, it's not in the benefit to actually have economic disintegration, it's the benefit of actually pursuing no matter what economic integration, because that gives you more competitive advantage in your negotiation.
Yes, economic integration. Yes. This is what you need to pursue.
First of all, because the UK is not Greece, and they don't have an Alexis Tsipras, this clown of a politician, to organize referendums only to say, to make yes into no and no into yes, the famous Kolotumba term. I must premise that Brexit will happen, whether we like it or not. The thing is how it happens. I'm not a politician, I don't really know. Secondly, though I am an immigrant in this country, I support Brexit. And I consider it the greatest opportunity that ever appeared to this country to become independent again. And I will go back to something that you did not mention, the relationship of the UK with the Commonwealth. You said nothing about the Commonwealth. It's the empire they had. In other terms, a Commonwealth which is presided over by the Queen, by Her Majesty, and her government, of course, which means you should perhaps look a bit into that thing and the trade agreements that will be very, very easily stricken by the UK government with the Commonwealth members. Something that you did not mention. And then you said, because I had things here that are reasonable in my view, the world peace. What world peace are we talking about? World peace where? In the First War? Because I don't see any world peace in sub-Saharan Africa where there is trafficking, everything, you know. I don't see any world peace in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. I see nothing like that. Yeah, where is the world peace then? So this is not world peace, it is just first world peace. That's what I see. A world dominated by us, who are the privileged developed ones. So I believe that it was rather the Cold War that sustained that famous world peace, and it was the fear that there would be a Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust. You said nothing about the bankers and the trust of bankers who governed from Brussels and Frankfurt, who strangled people, like the Greek people, like they attempted to do with Cyprus, with Portugal, with Ireland. So you said nothing about them. The fact that the EU, which started from a union that supported, as you said, some very, very interesting values like democracy or human rights, ended up being governed by Germany and her puppets, as it stands today and as it is. And you said, you mentioned the Commission that legislates, and then they send the votes that they decide in Brussels to be voted by a shadowy, as it has developed, institution, which is the European Parliament, so this means that decisions are not being made in the Parliament, which is voted by the people, but a shadowy organization called the Commission, which they vote, they say this is our law, take it and vote
No,
it.
the Commission doesn't vote.
Okay, that's my idea.
The Commission creates laws for the simple reason that if the Parliament was making laws, then they would have 700 laws every day. So the European Commission creates the laws, and it's ratified by the members of the Parliament and by the Prime Minister, which both of these bodies are elected.
However, what I consider the darkest point in your lecture is the racial differences part. The thing that you made, we live in the 21st century. Basing analysis on racial differences brings us back to far, far darker periods. And of course, John Maynard Keynes is no more a solid foundation to build a superstructure upon. That's it.
Okay. So we don't disagree on anything. So I think a lot of the things you say have to do with heterogeneity. A lot of the things you say have to do with a criticism on capital or on capitalism, which is quite a different thing. I would have to support economic trade. I would have to be in favor of economic agreements, because you have these agreements between developing and developed countries. And for example, you have major companies which create clothes. They are in developing countries. They create factories in those developing countries. They give jobs to these people. So if you have trade, you bring in, you stop the competition between countries, and you have a competition between people in terms of economics. So you have specific laws, and it's not violent like in war. So I think that the economic trade integration that we've seen in the last years, the last 50 or 60 years, are causing wars to stop. So that's my opinion.
I think most people here in this room didn't vote in the early 70s when we UK joined an European Economic Community for trade. I think a lot of people today are worried that over the years becoming like a federal superstate with more power to the center, and you have unelected, I call them quangos, who are dictating policy in the United Kingdom. I also think that you mentioned something about the UK's trade is around 60% with the EU. I don't know where you get that figure from, the 60%. But the United Kingdom exports only 18% of its overall exports to the EU. The other 82% goes elsewhere in the world. And I think people are more concerned that that's what's happening. There's more power going to the centre.
I agree. So more power going to the center, that's different preferences. So this is what I tried to describe when you were referring to heterogeneity. The 60%, I got it from the Office of National Statistics. I'm not interested in the numbers. So given that there is heterogeneity between the UK and the EU, I would be in favor of a Brexit, which is not hard, which has a good free trade deal between the EU and the UK. The problem is that the UK's GDP is made up from services, so it's hard to export services. And the other problem is, of course, the border here in Northern Ireland. One thing I forgot to mention, this theory, in the way that I said it, it doesn't talk about external threats. So the European Union as a superstate, it started being discussed in 1946. So we had a discussion about the United States of Europe and the European Defense Consortium. I can't remember the exact name. And we were talking about common defense. And that happened because both Americans and Russians are in Europe. So there was a talk about the political integration. So the external threats do cause political integration, and this applies to the United States of America. That's how the US were created. About China, this theory says that China, if it's if the monarchy there, if the communist regime there, because it's a regime, is broken, then China might break down.
We also forget to mention as well that the United Kingdom exports far less to the EU than what we import. The imports from the EU into the United Kingdom about triple the amount of what we export to the EU. And I'm positive, I still believe that we need to take it, say, look, we can go to the World Trade Organization rules, which is a 10% tariff. We can go to them rules, but I do think that the EU needs the UK more than what we need now.
So this is a discussion which creates the relative balance of strength, and this will determine the final relationship. So the problem is that in Theresa May's deal, the fishing ships from Europe would be still be able to access UK waters. And the reason is that Theresa May does not want this 9.6% tariff under World Trade Organization on the rules. So tariffs from it is a problem. These tariffs. And the second thing is that if you're not in the customs union, then you have to do massive border checks. So this also creates a big cost if you're importing all these goods. And there are some documentaries on the ports of the UK and how this would create congestions on Atlantic and so on. So all these are problems.
Can
I'll let someone else answer.
Excuse me, you can have one more, but because then we'll need to finish.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. First of all, I didn't mention in the beginning, and congratulations for the speech. Okay, really useful and very, very informative. One thing really that needs to be probably, I think, had to be covered is what's going to be really the impact in the life of the UK citizens, because this is by far one of the most important aspects. We know the economic theory, we know what happened, people who've been here and lived here all these years, they know really well what happened. So probably quite a lot of people who probably might came the last couple of years, but they will be here 20, 25 years like me. They know exactly what's going on. Now, first of all, one important thing, Greece played a major role to the Brexit. And the reason, because people who actually been here during the financial crisis in Greece in 2012 with the austerity and all this program, what happened with the austerity packages, they are pretty aware from their British friends that at every point, including clearly how the media handled the situation, it was look what happened to Greece. This is what Brussels imposed to Greece over those years, and that's why they're a dictator. Where really, they never mentioned the fact that Greece really produced more or less, let's say, £7, and they spent 25 over the last 30 years. Okay, so that's one case, and that's what led Greece go bust. Not really the fact that it was dictatorship in Brussels. Now, the other question now is what I said, that the real impact is, people talk about imports, exports, you talk about GDP and all these things. This is not the issue. Things are far more complex than I'm trading fish and I receive bio and I'm actually selling meat. The financial services here in UK generate 75% of the income tax. And this is now really where is the issue with the real life, the people's life, everyday life. If financial services move, and financial services for the last 2 years, they're massively moving out of the UK. So Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, most of the major investment banks of London, they're actually moving either to Frankfurt or in Paris. And they move chunks of people, 300 people this month, one department next month, another department. If we lose, if the UK government loses at least, let's say 20 or 30% out of the 70% of income tax generation income, government income from the budget, from the financial services, NHS will malfunction. Nobody will actually look after the roads. City councils, more or less, they're all of them disarray. They won't even have to pay people to collect the bills. So really, there is an economic meltdown. So the people who say Brexit is good is because really they see the thing in a very romantic way, rather really with a reality perspective that really what really will happen if it is a hard Brexit, which is that the UK economy will contract by at least 30% within the first year. Pound will devalue another 20% instantly. It already lost 5% within the last month. The devaluation will be massive, which means supermarkets, everything will go back at least 10% to 50% up. going to the supermarket to shop. Jobs will be lost. Industry is leaving. And it's leaving because at CBS we're living and they're living by the masses. Companies shut down departments here and open factories everywhere else in the EU. So it's going to be an economic meltdown. And people, you know, if they still believe that Brexit is actually good, I don't know. That's my view.
I don't disagree with many things. I think that the adjustment path is going to be it's
going to be really harsh. It will be depression. It's not going to be a recession. We'll talk about depression for at least 5 to 6 years, probably a generation.
I have to stop you here. I'm very sorry, but we have overrun. Thank you very much to Yiannis for this very easy to follow and interesting and informative talk. Thank you. If you have 2 minutes more to spare, we have some evaluation forms. We are very interested to find out what more you'd like to see from us, and we'll try our best to make it happen. Thank you very much.